Oh my goodness. Advent is just around the corner, and before we dive into the busyness of the season, I want you to go back to the text that we used for our call to worship, Psalm 132, when King David said, I will not give sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids until I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling place for the mighty God of Jacob. You know, it may not be immediately obvious to us, but these are the words of David as he's promising to find a place for the Ark of the Covenants in Jerusalem, to bring it into Jerusalem. For the Ark was that one object that symbolized Israel's God's presence. And the meaning of David's statement is, I'm not going to rest until we get that Ark of the Covenant and we find it a place in the capital, in Jerusalem. But maybe this is one place in the Bible where we don't need to dig down so deep into the meaning of what was going on and just read on the surface of the words to get some spiritual insight. So when the psalmist says, I will not give sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids until I find a place for the Lord. Can you hear? That's quite a resolution to say, find a place for God in our lives, in the busyness of our schedules, to think about God's will for our lives before anything else. Maybe that gets to the heart of what Christ the King Sunday is all about. The Reverend Susan Sparks, the senior pastor of Madison Avenue Baptist Church in New York City, published a wonderful sermon comparing two kings, Elvis Presley and Jesus of Nazareth. The king of rock and roll and the king of all creation. You may remember comedian Adam Sandler once compared Elvis and Jesus. He said, Jesus said, love your neighbor. And Elvis said, don't be cruel. Jesus is part of the Trinity, and Elvis's first band was a trio. And here we have Jesus, the shepherd of the Lord. Well, Elvis dated Sybil Shepherd. Well, you know, there's a lot of other coincidences you can go on. But Reverend Sparks notes the devotion that many people still have to Elvis. She says that while in Memphis she visited Sun Records, where Elvis recorded his first song. And when you go on the tour in Sun Records, there's an X marked with tape on the very spot where he stood. And the tour guide said, well, you know, just last month, Bob Dylan came in the door, walked over to that spot, knelt down, and kissed it. Then he got up, and he walked right back out the door. I mean, what a tribute from one legend of rock and roll to another. But you know, Reverend Sparks didn't just stop her tour there. She went to Graceland. And you know, they had some pretty long lines, and while she's waiting in line, she asked one of the tour guides, she said, well, how long did Elvis actually live here? And you could hear almost a gasp in the room, all the other fans lined up, and the tour guide, you know, kind of gracefully takes her to the side in a quiet voice, says, honey, we don't talk about him in the past tense here. And then she showed, you know, Graceland, written across her shirt, where Elvis lives. You know, it didn't matter that she hadn't actually seen Elvis, or that technically Elvis stopped walking the earth over 32 years before. It didn't matter. She didn't care. Elvis's fans didn't care. Without any proof, they believe he lives. Elvis lives, baby. The king lives. Not only that, says Reverend Sparks, because they believe he lives, Elvis's fans go out into the world and share his message. They play Elvis's music. They dress up as Elvis impersonators. They decorate their homes with all kinds of Elvis memorabilia. She says that one of her favorite things, she went in the gift shop at Graceland. You can imagine how full that was. Her favorite thing was a foot-high sprinkler with a plastic Elvis, and then when you turned on the water in the hose, his hips would shake as he watered your lawn. Then she added this interesting thought. Whatever, through the music, through the words, the impersonators or sprinklers, Elvis fans proudly proclaim the message of the King. So with all that, welcome to the last day of our church year. Welcome to Christ the King Sunday. Or some other churches are celebrating the reign of Christ. And a simple question that needs to be asked this day: who is king of your life? Is it Jesus? Is it Elvis? Some say LeBron James is the king. And there are other pop culture stars. And we know I have a gob of Star Wars memorabilia. But in our lesson from John's Gospel, Pilate is interrogating Jesus before the crucifixion. Are you the King of the Jews? Pilate asked. Is that your own idea? Jesus replied. Or did others talk to you about me? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Your own people and chief priest handed you over to me. What have you done? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would have fought to prevent my arrests by the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. And Jesus answered somewhat cryptically. What a good answer. Well, you say that I'm a king. And in fact, he gets down to it. The reason I was born and came into the world was to testify to the truth, and everyone on the side of the truth listens to me. Here's Pilate. He's got the might of the entire Roman Empire behind him. A garrison of soldiers right there in Jerusalem at his disposal. And does he think he's going to really intimidate Jesus? Well, good luck. He was sorely mistaken. If Pilate thought that he was in control of the situation, he might turn over his prisoner. He might carry out the wishes of the crowd. But all that he did was follow the script from the beginning of the worlds. That the Son of God would give his life so that everyone would know the love of God. And everybody would have life through him. So that gets us back to our question for the day. Who is your king? You know, everybody worships something or somebody. And if it's not Christ, it is something or someone that is far less worthy. What is it that keeps us busy? What must we get to before we can slumber? If it's not Jesus, we have some other Elvis or pop culture icon become our king. One of the 20th century's most profound, perceptive theologians, Paul Tillich, and he once said that whatever is our ultimate concern in life, that is our God. It's a good way to put it. Whatever is your ultimate concern in life, that is your God. It might be our appearance or bank accounts. It might be whoever is a popular media personality. It might be our allegiance to our country, or the quest for scientific truth, or a whole host of other important concerns. What is it in life you value most? Or what would you die for, or what are you willing to live for? Careful before you answer. It really is the most difficult question. Some people will say, oh, well, Jesus is the one who matters most in my life. But is that the way you live? When times of testing come, we discover maybe it's not Jesus that matters most of all. It is the esteem with which our friends hold us that really matters to us most. Some of us would rather get along by going along with the attitude of our friends. They just be pushed along in the crowd. What is it in your life that you value most? Some will say your family, and that's good. However, do you value your family higher than you value God? It's a tough call. one that you hope you don't have to make too often. You know, some missionaries have had to decide. You know, they can say, well, you know, it's one thing, I put my own life on the line to serve Christ. But do I put my wife in danger? Or even more, how about my kids? Is your family your greatest priority? Evangelical researcher George Barna, you know, he's done lots of studies, and he shows that there are far more people in our country who are willing to die for our country than for their faith. And you know, that's really revealing. Who is your king? Who or what do you worship? Biblical faith insists that God alone is worthy of our worship. And such faith sometimes demands extraordinary sacrifices. Michael Molden, in an article in Christianity Today, tells about a person who was willing to make Christ the King of his life. His name is Millard Fuller, and he was a really successful businessman. He had the big house and all the cars and everything that you could think of to buy. But you know, his wife wasn't happy with him. And he had gone to New York City to try to convince her to come back home. And she wasn't too easily convinced that he could turn back from his headlong rush into trying to accumulate as much wealth as possible. And Millard recalls, he said, we were in a taxi right after Linda and I had a very tearful session. We'd gone to Radio City Music Hall, and they showed the movie It's Never Too Late. And it was about a woman who wanted so desperately to be pregnant and thought that it was too late. But then she gave birth. The message was that it's never too late to change anything. And Millard goes on, he said, I had a sensation of light in that taxi. It was not anything spooky. And all I can say is it just came into my head, give your money away. Make yourself poor again. Throw yourself on God's mercy. And Millard turned to Linda and said, I believe that God just gave me the idea to give all our money away. And you know, she didn't jump out of the cab. She said, I agree, let's do it. Well, you know, they had plenty of friends and family and even pastors who tried to talk the Fullers out of carrying out their plan. But they believed that God was calling them to live a radical new life. And they ended up building one of the greatest ministries in our country. You've probably heard of it. It's called Habitat for Humanity. Millard Fuller and his wife gave everything away. Maybe that's not what everybody needs to do, but it's what they needed to do. So they could say, Jesus was their king. Are you ready to listen? Not let your eyes fall to slumber until you hear what God's will is for you? That's a question of the day. If Jesus is real, and if we should encounter him, what are the implications of that experience? I guess such circumstances we would discover. We would discover, is Jesus really king of our lives? Dr. Martin Luther King faced this question. He was preaching at Ebenezer Baptist Church that he loved. It was his father's church and then his. And he told them, just 2 months before his funeral would be in that same church, how he would like to be remembered. And in doing so, he zeroed back in on this ultimate question. If Christ is king, what does that mean? He said, if Christ is the ruler of our lives, then my Nobel Prize is less important than trying to feed the hungry. If Christ is king, then my invitation to the White House is less important than those I visited in prison. If Christ is Lord, then being Time Magazine's Man of the Year is less important than I try to love extravagantly, dangerously, and with all my being. And King was right, wasn't he? Oh man, wouldn't we all like to finish this life and people would say, he tried to love extravagantly, dangerously, and with all of his or her being. Yeah. Dr. King was right. If Christ is real, if he is king, then nothing else matters quite as much as that one fact. Why? Because we know that we can trust him with our families, with our personal destinies, with everything that is important to us. We can face the future confidently, triumphantly, if Christ is king. And you know the good news? The good news is that Christ is the king. In fact, we're going to proclaim he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I hope you're ready to enter this Advent season, waiting for our King, not the one who they think lives in Graceland. Christ the King, following Jesus, not letting anything or anyone else take his place as king. Not letting anything steal away our time and our attention with mere busyness.